Welcome to this video about improving biodiversity in the city. What determines the presence of biodiversity has to do with the components of safety to survive, food and water availability, the possibilities to reproduce next generations. But it also has to do with the variations which are needed to complete the whole life cycle and being able to compete with all the dynamics and changes. The connectivity at the population level, the food web and time, the continuity from one generation to the other generation, the residence, the area of origin, and also possibility to live in a certain space over long time periods, and last but not least, autonomy. Organisms are self-determined and should be well able to spontaneously take their position in space and time and in the ecological system. Now, business as usual in the city. This picture gives you a compilation of all kinds of human stress factors which are dominant in the urban life, in the urban system. Some organisms thrive with these business as usual conditions. Gulls, cormorants, foxes, grey herons. They all find their food, the safety, they are able to reproduce, etc., etc. So, they are well adapted because they are pioneers or generalists, flexible, opportunistic organisms. But overall, biodiversity goes down, as this graph of the fauna in urban areas shows from the index of 100 about 30 years ago that has now almost been halved. So, most organisms do not thrive in the city as it is organized nowadays. How can we improve that? That means that we have to develop new business models in which all the aspects of a city as it is now, with sealed surfaces, compacted soils, pollution, etc., needs to be changed. How can we mitigate the city as such to the 8 requirements for biodiversity? How can we shift our way of organizing cities more to the biodiversity point of view? It means that we have to look at the soil, the vegetation, the management, and also at the size and the possibilities to grow, settle and flourish for all kinds of organisms. And then we have to think of a city as an ecological matrix made of all kinds of structures, green structures, blue structures, brown structures, dark structures for the night-dwelling organisms, but also the buildings and the sealed surfaces are part of this ecological matrix. This matrix we can also adjust to be more open for the requirements of biodiversity. This matrix consists out of areas where animals can reproduce and out of corridors to move from one side to the other. It also contains sites where they can rest or sit or perch. We have to think at different scales and also along gradients. And the city does not only function by itself, but it is positioned in a geomorphological context and has a certain topography which we can use and which we can build upon. And especially we have to think along the principles that biodiversity needs habitat diversity, rough and equal irregular surfaces, substrates and environments. And we can achieve already much with a slight alteration of our common practices. If we have the ditches designed in a more natural way, then immediately it pays off with an enlargement of the number of species and individuals of all kinds of organisms. And the graph shows you the number of damselflies and dragonflies that increased around nature-friendly banks. But this also applies to mammals, worms and butterflies. If you have a more ecological design of the bank, much more biodiversity will occur. We will see the same kind of growth of biodiversity if we change our mowing regime to a more differentiated mowing regime, what we call mosaic or sinus mowing. Immediately, the number of plant species will increase. For example, the number of butterflies will increase connected to the larger number of flowering plants, so it immediately pays off. So what we have to do is to change from plant life in the city as a decoration of our living environment to a more ecological way of thinking about plant life and the whole ecosystem. So don't destroy caterpillars and then complain that there are no butterflies, because a caterpillar and a butterfly are one and the same individual. And don't use poisonous chemicals for growing or safeguarding plant life. There are enough natural enemies. There is much movement of seeds by wind animals and insects. For example, your garden will immediately become vegetated without human interference, making use of natural processes. In the city, we can develop new ecosystems, and if we let nature grow by itself, we give biodiversity much more chances. One of the novel ecosystems is on the roof of buildings, and the thicker the substrate is, the more plant life and the more animal life is possible. So, if we enlarge the capacity for substrates on buildings, the biodiversity will increase because it will be able to develop it into novel ecosystems, and also the green facades. Don't think in luxurious plant life, vertical plant life, but think in whole plant life, rock plants and rock facades. That will give an enormous boost to the biodiversity in the city. To conclude, what we have to think for ecological management and design is taking the requirements for biodiversity and business climate into account. The biggest innovation we can achieve is to be patient and accept the pace of the ecological processes as the basis of city life. And we should not forget, which is hidden is often more important than the ones we see most. Thank you for your attention.